It is 23 degrees Celsius here in Abuja. A rainy morning as well, but your daily dose of sunshine is here. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, as at the last check, it wasn't raining in Lagos yet, but sure is cloudy. Today is August 27, exactly 41 years when the former military president Ibrahim Babangida became the military president of Nigeria in 1985. Amayo Makinde, welcome to the show.
Well, quite a history, a piece of history to remember. I think that for many Nigerians though, I mean, those who were born in the 80s, now 85, you know, in their 40s, at least 41 or thereabout, 41 years, Ayo. Yeah. How old are you? I just thinking about it. What were you doing on that particular day? But that's a bit of distraction right now. I think a key underlying question is how has the life of Nigerians improved since that day? Because for a number of people, it's been government in, government out. Every government promising to make their life better. Either whether they took over by coup, or whether they have now come in, as we now have democratically elected, Nigeria's longest unbroken democratic run. And the question is, how has our lives improved as Nigerians? Are we doing better than we did 40 years ago? These are key questions. Well, yesterday it was seen that in acknowledgement of just where Nigerians are in terms of their everyday well-being, the federal government launched another program acknowledging that things are still a bit rough, maybe more than a bit rough for Nigerians. Well, they unveiled a $1 billion. When I heard it, I had to clean my ears. As a matter of fact, it still feels a bit blocked. $1 billion social protection initiative, which is aimed at moving vulnerable Nigerians from dependence on temporary palliatives to sustainable pathways of economic empowerment and self-reliance. That's what the program is supposed to be about. Now, we haven't quite heard the nitty-gritty of how this is supposed to work, but this is an idea that they now have, and they have now launched it. I know for skeptics and critics, they're wondering, a $1 billion program in the Ministry of Poverty Alleviation meant to help Nigerians from dependence on temporary palliatives just a few months before the general elections. Government. I don't know, Ayo, whether the timing is important sometimes in the launch of this kinds of things. Because one would have thought that when we were thinking, or in the immediate aftermath of subsidy removal, that would be one of the things I would have thought about. How are we going to cushion effectively? And that perhaps would have had a little more rigor. Whilst a lot of people would have said, okay, well, the president had a knee-jerk reaction in terms of how he took it out. He just announced it, and it has been acknowledged that it wasn't even in the script, but I guess he put it in that place where he doesn't have to follow his script. I mean, but he put it in a place where it would have been if you were going to be in his script. There was a lot of, nobody even remembers what was around the script at that particular point in time, but it was referring to subsidy. And I guess to avoid any ambiguity, he just said, few subsidies gone. So don't think too much about it. We're not staying on it. But then the question was, what should then happen? What sort of rigor should happen in terms of, or the rigor in thinking in terms of how the effect of it should be cushioned for Nigerians? Well, some people will say better late than never. If it's coming for how many months to elections? Now we have September, October, November, December. Elections are in January. But 4 months to elections, better late than never. But then this timing, you cannot just help but, raise an eyebrow as to what exactly is going on here. Ayo, are you wondering as we are?
Well, there are a number of other issues. I mean, it's only natural for us as a people to wonder that wonder, so to speak. The timing is definitely something, and the president is, of course, very, very conscious of timing for everything. But there are a number of other things at play in my mind about this particular one. Brilliant initiative, there is no doubt about it. There is the last time, to do a good thing such as this was yesterday. The next best time is now. So one would say better late than never. So it is praised. Another thing that we should applaud there is that it's not something that is just coming from the presidency. A minister is involved in it, and we see that the governor of Borno State was also seated in that hall. So yes, we can see some kind of spread, some kind of inclusion in that. One major question that I would want to ask, is the modus operandi. Of course, we don't expect the First Lady's office or the First Lady herself to be the one to determine how it is going to go. We know that it's a program, it's all been thought through and all, and we know that whoever it is, they have done whatever it is that needs to be done to make sure that the thinking is done right. Glad, Usually the challenge we've had, Marco, if you would recall, history tells us, has always been implementation. I remember when I think it was the Buhari government or this Tinubu government came into power, a number of people were questioning the social social intervention program of the president, of the previous administration. And all the governors were saying that they didn't know how the list came about. Has that been determined now? Now, they were supposed to review whatever it was, because I remember that the previous list of the most vulnerable in the society was a program, a detailed program facilitated by the World Bank. And part of the intention for that was to ensure that there is no politicization or politicking around all these things. Whether or not that has been done, that's another issue. Secondly, we don't even know, who are the people that are going to be. We know it says vulnerable, but define vulnerable. The World Bank, that World Bank intervention had defined what vulnerable is in a society such as that we have in our country. But is it the same parameters that are going to be used? What agency of government is going to be dissipating all of these resources? Those communication would also be very, very good to know, so that people will not say or will not fear what we fear here, that this is intended for some auspicious intervention of government. But it is a welcome development. There is no doubt about it. People need all the help that they can get. People need all the intervention that they can get. Another leg of this conversation for me, Malfe, is the president has a number of times always called out the governors to do the needful for their people. And when you're getting a lot more resources, in trillions are being shared among all the different tiers of government, now this government is putting out something in the region of 1.3 trillion naira, because that's what the $1 billion will come to. And I don't know why they didn't use naira instead of dollars, especially at a time when the president is talking about a stronger naira. 1.3 trillion naira or thereabout, that's what this comes to. So is this instead of what the governors were supposed to be doing or were expected to be doing, or this is something, an initiative of the federal government to intervene? Because what we've understood was that the states were getting more resources so that they can dissipate to their indigents more. Now we haven't been hearing much of that, and people are calling out the governors to do more. But, well, by and large, Markwe, I think it's a good idea. The challenge that the next step that we are expecting now is the mode of operation when it comes to implementation of the ideal.
No, or what we have heard so far, just to also mention to our viewers that our colleague Shinwo Kimbaloye had a very detailed interview yesterday with the Minister of Poverty Alleviation, the Ministry of Poverty Alleviation, and he gave a little more detail on what this program is supposed to be about. So just in case you missed that interview, you might want to go back and watch it. But we understand that this is something that's supposed to work with the federal government and states, as well as development partners. So part of the criticism which has been leveled against the federal government is that it has not come up with any sustained program, neither has it come up with a coordinated program in the aftermath of the removal of fuel subsidy and the flotation of the naira. So perhaps this program is taking that into cognizance and trying to see how it can correct that. So we understand the program will be called the Household Prosperity and Empowerment Social Protection Project. It has 5 instruments working together to build one coordinated national system. Our correspondent Larry Lasisi was at that event yesterday and he covered it.
Reforms continue to improve investor confidence and increase government revenue. The need to protect vulnerable Nigerians from the economic shocks become more imperative. This is the focus of this gathering.
Thank you, George.
The unveiling and launch of the $1 billion Social Protection Initiative, known as the Household Prosperity and Empowerment Social Protection Project, a project with 5 instruments working together to build one coordinated national system.
Your Excellency.
In attendance is the First Lady of Nigeria, ministers, international development partners, and heads of government agencies.
A humanitarian champion.
The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction outlines the key parts of the project.
We want to change the delivery mechanism of humanitarian interventions and poverty reduction. We want this to be done through a single window. Everyone that is delivering an intervention is creating a register. Everyone is creating a data center. And these are not talking to one another. So our reform under the One Humanitarian, One Poverty Response System intend to bring this all together so that these programs can interact one with another.
Some of the dignitaries present speak in support of the initiative.
The social protection policy, which has been reviewed, recognizes first and foremost that we are a federation. And social protection is multifaceted, multi-institutional, multi-tiers of government.
Launching of this program will go a long way in addressing the root causes of the insurgency in Nigeria. I want to call upon the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to ensure that targeted beneficiaries are selected based on set vulnerability criteria that will ensure inclusivity.
The development partners present affirm their readiness to support Nigeria's effort to strengthen the social safety net.
Of Nigeria to formally do the unveiling of the $1 billion.
Delivering the keynote address, the First Lady makes clear her joy that the project aims to improve the lives of Nigerians, particularly vulnerable individuals, families, and communities across the country.
Our nation is implementing far-reaching reforms to strengthen the economy, lay a solid foundation for sustainable growth and shared prosperity. And these reforms continue to take effect. We must recognize that given the size of our population and available resources, many families still face challenges and require our collective support.
Yes, ma'am.
She then leads other dignitaries for the formal unveiling.
Amen.
The project outlines a bold and innovative plan to move people from palliatives to pathways, a commitment to strengthen Nigeria's social protection framework for a large number of people. Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
Well, it is no news that the Nigerian Bar Association has been holding its conference in Port Harcourt, and all manner of issues have emanated from it. But this morning, we are having a conversation on the law, institutions, and the state of Nigeria's democracy ahead of 2027. We know that the Nigerian judiciary plays a critical role in making sure that our democracy is stabilized, and that when actors within the political space are dissatisfied with the processes, they are usually the last resort. And they intervene sometimes for good or for bad, depending on how you see it. This morning, Mr. Femi Falana joins us now. He is a senior advocate of Nigeria and a human rights activist. It is good to see you this morning. Well, we would have wished that you were in our studios, but we don't know. Are you back in Lagos or you're still in Port Harcourt?
Back in Lagos. I'm back in Lagos.
Oh, you're back in Lagos. Okay. Well, you certainly had your day in Port Harcourt, and you had some words, but some of them were not very friendly for the organizing committee in terms of the choice of those who were invited to that particular conference. And you didn't think that former president of Liberia, George Weah, was one of those who should have been speaking, because you said he did not quite, he didn't quite uphold the rule of law when he was in office as president, particularly rulings coming from the ECOWAS court. What has been the response of the Nigerian Bar Association to some of the criticisms that you have leveled against it?
Well, the Nigerian Bar Association cannot challenge me because I handled two of the cases that I cited because under President George Weah, about 4 judgments of the ECOWAS court were disregarded, but I handled 2 of the cases. And my position, because the truth of his submission is that you may have a civilian president who behaves like a dictator. I mean, if he has no respect for the rule of law, if he harasses the media and the rest of them, you know, so he can't be called a genuine Democrat. And those are the characteristics of President Weah when he was in power. The media, even though his regime decriminalized freedom of expression, but the media, so the radio stations were closed down, the journalists were hounded. In fact, there was a BBC journalist who had to be hounded out of the country. So that was the atmosphere that operated in Liberia. And I did say that because citizens lost confidence in the judiciary in that country, they had to rush to the ECOWAS court for legal redress. So nobody has challenged the fact that he complied with court order. And in particular, the current president, President Buakai, has already set up a committee to implement one of the 2 judgments that I cited. Yep.
All right. Well, that wasn't the only thing that caused a bit of controversy. I do know that lawyers were divided over whether or not social media activist VDM ought to have been invited as well. What did you make of that?
In those days, the NBA brought individuals who had paid their dues, who were coming to engage lawyers intellectually. We wanted to learn from them, and so the NBA was not our conferences were not. None of our conference was a circle show in the past. You know, so if you are bringing in an expert to discuss the security of the country, either from the private or public sector, such an individual must have contributed to the security architecture of the country. But when you bring people who have nothing to do with the security of the country, there are problems. It's like talking about media freedom, press freedom. You are going to bring practitioners in that field, either in the academics or in the newsroom. But to just go and bring somebody from nowhere to come and entertain you, there are problems with that. And I think that was the problems associated with that particular lecturer, individual.
Well, I'm sure that, I do not know whether you've seen the response of some of your colleagues, some of them very senior as well. I'm going to be citing the response of Professor Chidi Odinkalu to that particular one. He says it's customer feedback, that the law and the courts are for everyone, and the lawyers who are like say advocating the temple of justice now, I'm trying to look for the particular word that lawyers use, you know, should not shy away from listening to feedback from people who have cause to always interact with the law, and that's how he sees it. Do you share his perspective?
With profound respect to my very good friend Chidi Odinka, he was talking in a general sense, but we're talking of this particular case. I mean, if we are talking of justice delivery in the country, we now want to hear from members of the public. That will be okay. But if you are talking about the security of the country, it does require that you bring people who are involved in maintaining the security of the country, or who are victims of abduction and the rest of them. So, as lawyers, we must link up with members of the public. We must hear from them, but not in specific areas which require some kind of expertise, so that lawyers can learn and be positioned to take care of their own security, as well as the security of members of their family. For instance, we're talking about state police now, and you would expect anybody who's going to speak in that area to tell us when we had regional police in the country, why did we embark on centralizing the police force? Why are we now going back to what we had in the First Republic? I think this is the kind of problem that was associated with some of the speakers that have been brought to address us. In those days, the submissions of some of our lecturers, like the late Dr. Akeola Aguda, when he addressed us in 1985, or the late Justice Oputa, when he addressed our conference in 1987, for several days and weeks, their submissions became matters of public discourse. Editorial comments were written on them. Lawyers debated them even after the conference, and we learned from them. And I think lawyers are saying we should go back to that era. I mean, take my own case, for instance. There are African leaders who believe in the rule of law, who promote the rule of law in their country, who obey court orders. Who obey court orders in their country. So if you are going to have a former head of state to address lawyers to talk about democracy or rule of law, then you must bring some who can say, when I was in power, there was not a single court order that I disobeyed. I didn't lock up people illegally. I didn't harass the media, and so on and so forth. And there are a couple of them in the continent, if you want to be educated. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Falana, let me bring you back, to the courts now, especially as we prepare for the 2027 elections. In what state would you say our judiciary is as we go into the polls? Would you say that it has been able to discharge itself creditably well in some of the cases that have come before it as we prepare for the 2027 elections?
No, there is no indication yet that the Nigerian judiciary is positioned to address the challenges that may emanate having regard to some conflicting decisions with respect to the elections that are likely to take place in January and February next year. But for me, I think the first matter to address is the role of the judiciary in the electoral process in Nigeria. We must stop the practice whereby the courts determine the winners of election in Nigeria. You just had an election in Osun State. Forget all the shortcomings. At the end of the day, the beauty of it will be that the governorship election will not go to court. Because the people have decided, they've elected their leader. So no court should be allowed to hide under technicalities, to torpedo, as it were, or to make a mockery of the popular choice of the people. So for me, the role of the judiciary will have to be extremely limited in the democratic process in our country. And again, a lot depends on the media, the INEC, and all concerned Nigerians to ensure that elections are properly conducted, to ensure that no fake results are announced, so that you limit the area that people may want to go to election petition tribunal for, or the regular courts or the appellate courts. So we must start with the conduct of good elections, so that, as it is in most African countries, our courts will have limited role in the democratic process. Secondly, and that was what I was expecting lawyers to do in Port Harcourt, elections are coming. And this suggests the Bar Association must quickly convene a meeting attended by election experts among us, lawyers, so that the bar can let them know the feeling of members of the public with respect to the role of lawyers and judges in the democratic process in our country. The media, too, must also ensure that elections are properly monitored and well reported, as we had in the case of Osun State. Once we can put the machinery of having credible elections in place, of course, for me, the role of the judiciary will be limited. And when tribunals are called upon to intervene in the democratic process, everything must be done. No court should resort to technicalities or crass legalism to deny the people the right to choose their leaders. That's my position, you know.
All right, let me quickly take this to Ayo, because I know he also has further questions for you. Ayo.
Thank you very much, Malpe. Mr. Falana, that position raises a bit of a question, because as we have also heard from legal practitioners such as yourself, the judiciary is not Santa Claus. They don't just dish out anything. The judiciary is not the one that goes to anyone. The judiciary is a place where lawyers come to. Can we excuse lawyers from whatever decision a court in Nigeria takes? Because it is the lawyers that are going to make the case. It's the lawyers that are going to argue for or against the case. And so when the decision is going to be taken, the judiciary or the courts are just going to hold whatever position they see based on whatever evidences are laid before them. Why should those cases in the first place, Mr. Falana, go to the courts if the legal practitioners or the legal industry, so to speak, agree that some things ought not to go to court?
Please, can you come again? I didn't quite...
Okay. I'm saying that the courts is not Santa Claus. They don't just dish out gifts to anyone. Someone goes to court and then the other person comes to defend. In this case, usually legal practitioners, and which is why you also said that lawyers should have a round table to discuss these things. Some cases ought not to go to court, but then it would seem like every case goes to court. And so can we really blame the courts for whatever decision is held when it is the legal practitioners, the lawyers, that take those cases to court in the first place?
Lawyers. And in this case, most petitions are handled by very senior lawyers. In our legal side, concerns are being expressed, and we're to call ourselves to order. And that was why I demanded from the NBA, I demanded that the NBA should call an urgent conference of lawyers, particularly those who have the election petitions, so that we can advise us, we can get us, and no cases that should go to court. And when these cases go to court, and judges must ensure and they do in some other jurisdictions. Very bad cases to fall. Lawyers are sanctioned. And that was what happened when President Trump and his support filed about 62 petitions. Many of them, because judges have read them, withdrawn because the judges threatened to sign or refer such lawyers to the disciplinary committee. Here, we allow every action filed in court. And when to election petition, our judges must move speedily to strike out frivolous petitions. The part of Synod or the part of the Nigerian Bar Association, because most of these cases are reported, we must also be able to call ourselves to order. But when judges have to decide cases, they must not determine them on the basis of technicality. You can't say, whereas INEC officials should have used a red pen, they use a blue one, therefore we are nullifying result. Oh, INEC should have stamped the back of a ballot paper because it was not done. We are going to cancel 165,000 votes. No, that should no longer be permitted in our country.
Well, Mr. Falana, in your response to the first question mark we asked about the readiness of the judiciary or legal practitioners for the 2027 elections, your response is that it doesn't seem like we are ready. So the question then will be, what are the gaps we need to fill for us to be ready? Because it is known by us all, even in the build-up to the Osun State governorship elections, it was just about 24 hours or thereabout that a particular case was resolved and INEC had to do the needful. The kind of pressure that INEC must have been put under when materials ought to have been distributed at that time, I think one can only imagine. So what are the things that we need to do ahead? What are the gaps we must fill? What warning should go to legal practitioners and even the judiciary about these elections so that it's far less contentious than the ones we've ever had?
For instance, it is totally unacceptable to deliver rulings or judgments in respect of elections that are 24 hours away or 36 hours away. Just like the case of Osun, I didn't know the miracle. What INEC did was simply miraculous by including the name of a party that was not on the ballot, barely 24 hours after a court gave a decision. That decision was enough to postpone the election, and INEC will have the rights. And the public would then have decided on the judiciary that maybe it was planned. And so for judges, these cases ought to be decided within 1 week. In a pre-election matter, you want to find out whether somebody has a school certificate, whether he went to school or not. Why should that take weeks or months to decide? When in fact, why sitting on that table? The judge can do the needful. I once gave evidence in a case in the United States of America. My flight was delayed. The lawyer representing me in that case, incidentally in Nigeria, Honorable Kayode Oladele, informed the judge that I was airborne. And the judge asked, can we have the details of the flight? He supplied it, and the judge found out, case adjourned to tomorrow. And the court found out that indeed I was airborne. If the contrary had been the case, that would have been enough reason to get that lawyer dispatched in the United States of America. So we must get to that level here, where our judges, particularly in pre-election matters, in election matters, because they are time-bound, judges must not allow lawyers to browbeat them or blackmail them into adjourning cases when they are not necessary.
Well, Mr. Falana, recently you also said that Nigeria does not have what you call electoral integrity. Now, is that as a result of our laws, a result of the political class, the democracy we practice, how we practice it, or what exactly drew you to that conclusion?
It's impunity of the ruling class. Again, you go back to Osun. From reports in the media, about 30 people have been killed. Nobody is being prosecuted. Somebody threatened a senator, threatened or rather incited people to attack members of another political party. Even though, based on public pressure, the senator was arrested. Why has he not had his day in court? I also have a case where a man who never contested the election in the NURTW is sitting in the secretariat, national secretariat of that body in Abuja. I'm talking of Mr. Oluomo. Baruwa was the one elected, pronounced elected by the National Industry. A stranger is in the office of the headquarters of Abuja. Mr. Baruwa went to his office, with the government. He was arrested by the police and charged before the court. We cannot operate that way. We cannot operate that way. We have a country where judgments are obeyed. If you have a regime that does not obey judgments of court, including the decisions of the Supreme Court, then you can't talk of democracy.
Well, if we are saying, Mr. Falana, that there is, if we are saying that there is widespread impunity, particularly concerning elections, and we want electoral integrity, then which agency of government or who should be holding anyone to account? We know that INEC has to collaborate with security agencies and the rest of them. And we have been complaining about these things for the longest time throughout this republic. So who should be bearing the brunt? Who should we hold responsible? Who should Nigerians be holding responsible for this lack of electoral integrity? Or are we just going to rescind to complaining all the time?
No, parts of the ruling class are not prepared to get elections in Nigeria. Again, we have to go back. When we had the problem in 2007, the president of the country, the late Yar'Adua, said, the election that brought me to power is at the floor. I want to stop the manipulation of elections in Nigeria. A panel was set up, headed by the late Chief Justice of Nigeria, Muhammad Uwais. That one of his recommendations is that we should have an electoral offences commission. Every regime since then, every regime has.
Okay. Well, we have to thank you very much. For some reason, we couldn't quite hear you at the end. But we thank you very much for your time this morning. We know that it's an ongoing conversation because, hey, January is just a few months away and we know issues are still going to arise. Mr. Femi Falana is a senior advocate of Nigeria and a human rights lawyer. Thank you again for your time today. Now, when we return, we take on another sort of roundup of the way the week has gone. To stay with us.
Afternoon or this evening, so many Nigerians have been calling me to say that, one of my press aides had contradicted me in my policy statement as far as subsidy is concerned. I want to repeat categorically that what I said, I will return subsidy, I will. And Nigeria is rich enough to look after the welfare of its citizens. Therefore, let it be clearly stated that he was not speaking on my own authority, because the removal of subsidy has driven more Nigerians into poverty than at any other time in the history of this country. And the fundamental responsibility of the government is the welfare of the citizens. Two, I will make sure we secure this country. We are competing with thieves. They stole the election. Now they have stolen the economy. They have stolen everything.
Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, who is also the presidential candidate of the African Democratic Congress, clarifying his stance on the removal of fuel subsidies, saying he'll bring it back, and he's not mincing words on that. Well, this particular issue has now formed the fulcrum, or seems to be forming the fulcrum, of what this campaign is going to be hinged on from almost all of the parties that are concerned. This morning, we're joined by Mr. Laulu Akonde, as we've seen, is the host of Channels Television's Inside Sources and also a former presidential aide. Good morning and welcome.
Good to see you again, Margaret.
An aide's job is always difficult, you know. I mean, when the former vice president said what he said in Hausa, I'm sure people were wondering, he's going to bring it back. Maybe that was what the aides were wondering. Is he going to bring it back? Okay, maybe he's going to bring it back temporarily, then he's going to take it away again. And then there was a lot of interpretation of what he said and what he didn't say, and he had to come out to say, look, it looks like I've been misinterpreted. For the sake of clarity, I mean to bring this back. How do you think this should be interpreted? How does communication go usually between principals and their aides, who are supposed to help spread and clarify in clear terms what it was that their principals were trying to say?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think this is another proof of how we are beginning to bastardize, you know, and I hope that's not too strong. I'm trying to find something that is not as strong as that. But essentially, how our political elites are making a mincemeat, making nonsense of how they ought to organize their spokespeople. And so what is happening, or what we have seen happen in the Atiku camp, it also had happened even in the presidency, you know, where you have spokespeople taking different positions on issues publicly. So it's a reflection of how, and I say this with a lot of responsibility. I say with a lot of responsibility, but it has to be said. It's a reflection of how careless, you know, public communication has been taken for a long time by political leaders. Look, when I was a presidential spokesperson, you know, before I make any statement at all, I had to clear it. I had to have a conversation with the principal, okay? And we made sure that there is only one official spokesperson, just one. There might be other people who will be speaking in designated platforms, okay? Like for instance, we had somebody just talking on the talk shows in radio and television, and we have somebody doing social media, which is essentially commentary. But when it comes to speaking officially, there ought to be only one person doing that, whether for the president or for a presidential candidate. So Atiku needs to clean his house. Right now, he has too many people who don't understand their job, and I suspect that he himself, Atiku himself, doesn't understand how to organize the office of the spokesperson. And that's why you see Frank Shaibu and Paul Ibe, saying different things. It's very messy. But it's not just Atiku. It has even happened under this presidency. So yes, it doesn't show cohesion, and for me, it reflects how careless, and I say that with a lot of responsibility, a lot of our political elites handle public information.
Do you think it's so much about that or the issue itself? In terms of, for some people, they have raised question as to fuel subsidy. How do you intend to bring it back? I mean, it would seem that they were trying to make excuses because for those who understand and for those who see things from the prism of maybe not this current government, but in terms of where we're coming from and the trajectory of this conversation around fuel subsidy, it would seem that there was general consensus on the fact that it should go. What we couldn't agree on was how it should go, when it should go, in what manner it should go. But it would seem that there had been a strong enough case made that this thing needed to go. So maybe, do you think that there was a bit of an embarrassment that, okay, where is this coming from? And so it was an attempt to manage expectations around this sort of promise being made by their principal.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that the bigger issue is about the content of the argument about subsidy, the reopening of the debate, which I must commend Atiku for. Yes, of course, his political enemies must make a meal of the fact that he's, he's quote unquote flip-flopping. They have a duty to call him out on that. But I think on the whole, Atiku is doing us as a nation a good turn by saying, and this is how I interpret it, we need to reopen this conversation. We need to look at this debate again. Now, I think that subsidy, the way it was being managed in the past has been a scam. I think the president himself, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has said that. And so there is the need, and as a matter of fact, in 2022, all of the presidential candidates, the major ones, said that we're going to remove it. So there is a consensus that we need to remove subsidy in the way that it was being done. What there is no consensus, or there was never a consensus about, is how do you ensure that the poor people are not the ones that are going to be carrying the burden, because you have some rich elites, business elites, even political elites who have been gaming the system, which is what the subsidy scam is. So you can't remove the subsidy scam, without sorting out how the ordinary Nigerians would not be the ones carrying the body, which is what we have what is happening right now. Yes, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is right to say that we got to stop this subsidy. Everybody knew that. He had the courage to do it. But it is also a scam if you then dump all the responsibility and the burden on the poor people who did not do anything wrong in that subsidy scam. Second point. And then we say that it's a subsidy scam. Where are the convictions? Where are those who game the system? What is the consequence that they are suffering? And so when you have a situation where the poor people, the ordinary Nigerians, are the ones that are carrying the can, and those elites, those fat cats who were gaming the system with a subsidy running into billions of naira, even trillions, they are walking free, Malpe. Nobody is holding them to an account. That is also a scam.
Indeed. And maybe some people will say maybe that's what his press people were trying to manage, that, that consensus it was saying. But let me, take you to this issue now, because it will seem as a result of this. And it's unclear, because you never know until it is launched.
Yeah.
But here we are. The federal government has now launched a $1 billion Hope Social Protection Program. It's a social protection initiative, which is aimed at moving vulnerable Nigerians from dependence on palliatives to sustainable pathways of economic empowerment and self-reliance. That's what they say it is.
Yeah.
And it's coming 4 months to elections. It doesn't remind you of anything. Because I do know that, you know, Vice President Osinbajo also came under some fire when they were doing the market trader money just a few weeks before elections. And some people say, well, it's a good thing. You've always had the social protection program, but the timing is the challenge. What is your take on the timing of this particular project? Because some people will say 4 months to elections, to be launching such a program like this, $1 billion. Are we trying to buy votes here?
Well, you know, quite frankly, you know, Markwe, we have to look at the bigger picture. Yes, again, the political opponents of the president, you know, they have a basis to go after him, like they came after, you know, the Buhari-Osinbajo presidency, you know, because they want to, you know, shake things up. They want to get it their job, you know, so they are free to go that way as much as possible. But I think government and myself in this position, I am concerned about whether indeed this is going to serve the interest of the poor people. Do you think those poor people care? You know, if government is organizing something that seems a legitimate way to assuage their sufferings, they don't care whether you did it on your first day in office or you did it on your second to the last day in office. They just want to be helped. And for me, that is the common interest. So I will ask that, yes, we wish that this had been done earlier, but if it is being done now, let it be done properly, let it be done decently, and let it be done quickly to get help to the people. Nigerians that are suffering, they cannot afford the luxuries of those of us who do political punditry, you know, the opponents trying to get, no, Nigerians don't have time for that. We can have that luxury, they don't. So I commend this move. You know, I wish it started earlier. And I like the fact that, you know, it's going to be a $1 billion, you know, because if you translate that, I guess that's going to come to about probably over 100 billion or 150. I think we can even do more. But I hope that this is a serious program. I hope this is a program that is going to be properly well articulated and implemented. Because as we are speaking today, I don't know that we have been able to answer that question of, you know, having a social safety net that is being efficiently managed. If this one is going to be an answer to that, then it is welcome.
Well, I know that Ayo has a quick question for you on the campaign council list. Ayo, over to you.
Well, thank you. Just, I would rather, you know, avoid that one. I'm very much interested in the issue of the cost of living, even though that APC listing thing is also something that you may want to speak to. You may want to speak about it as well, Mr. Akonde, particularly when people expected that maybe the list would be recalled, but now we hear it's being reviewed. But I'm more interested in the fact that the cost of living crisis is something that it seems many people, particularly in the state governments, aren't talking about. You talked about us heaping the responsibility of the subsidy on Nigerians. But then we also have heard the president say a number of times that the reason the state governments get more resources is so that they can cushion the effect of the subsidy on their people. It would seem like either there is no agreement on that between the federal and the state governments, or that everyone is just radio silent on that. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much, Ayo, for that question. I think we have to find a way to hold the state governors more accountable in our country. The president is right that more money has been going to the state government, and I don't think they're even denying it. Some of them are saying that, well, you know, there's been inflation, the value of the money is not as good as when, and some of that is also correct. But it is not entirely correct, because nobody has actually done an increase, for instance, in the emolument that is paid public service or public servants based on something that really matches up the inflation. So the bottom line is that there is much more money in the hands of state governments to actually impact, at least in my view, 3 areas: education, health, and agriculture. And there is nothing in our constitution today that limits state governments from delivering on those 3 areas. The constitution doesn't limit them at all. Trying to help agriculture, ensuring that the produce gets to the market in such a way that it doesn't significantly change the price or up the price. You know, if state government try to find a way to bring the produce closer to the people so that the transportation cost can be cut off. Many state governments are not doing that. I think that was the time Lagos State started, you know, some farmers market stuff. I don't know how much they have sustained that. But then come to the issue of health. I mean, there was a guy who went to on Instagram, you know, after Ugo's death. You know, God bless his soul. Very talented, wonderful icon in the entertainment industry is dead. And he said that they found out that there are no radiotherapy facilities in any Lagos State government hospital. When I saw that, I forwarded it to some of the people in government in the state. Say, is this true? That the only radiotherapy facility exists in Luth, which is a federal hospital. So you have a lot of people who are queuing. There's a long queue for people who need that service. And I'm wondering, why can't a state government sort those things? So in areas of education, in areas of health, in areas of agriculture, we have to find ways to hold the governors accountable. We are not doing much in trying to call them. Everybody is focused on the president in Abuja. But in this particular area, we must find means to hold the governors responsible. We must call them out, especially on education, health, and agriculture, because nothing limits them.
Well, I believe that quite a number of state governors should be taking the cue and releasing their scorecards as well. After all, the federal government has shown example in that regard with the Ministry of Finance coming out with its own scorecard. But we have to thank you, as always, for coming on Sunrise Daily. Mr. Laulu Akonde is the host of Channels Television's Inside Sources and a former presidential aide. That's where we draw the curtains this morning. Thank you for watching. I'm Maofe Ogunyusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makine. Enjoy the rest of your day.